Hey everybody, I hope you can hear me. I hope this is working. I'm so excited to be back on YouTube. Oh my goodness. If you can hear me, say hi in the chat box, or maybe you could give this video a thumbs up or share this video. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to this channel. And then there's also a link down in the description section for I'm starting another channel for daily vlogs and daily support for survivors. So that's super exciting. I'm not going to take up a lot of time right now in the beginning of this video discussing why I wasn't on YouTube for a few weeks because it doesn't seem like it is the healthiest and most useful use of my time. So for anyone who is curious as to what happened and why I was not on YouTube for a few weeks, here supporting survivors, which is what I do, then after I'll cut this video short tonight in about an hour, and I'll start a new hangout here on the channel immediately following this one, and I'll record and let you guys know what happened and what was going on, and et cetera, and then we'll be done. How's that sound? So it is currently 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6:02 p.m. Pacific, 9:02 Eastern on Monday, October 30th, and tonight's topic is healthy trauma narrative, or trauma narrative versus healthy narrative. A little slip there, not quite Freudian, but you know what I mean, little slip there. So as trauma survivors, we all have a narrative, and our narrative, believe it or not, shifts and it changes. And depending on what our narrative shifts and changes to, that will dictate or be indicative of the level of healing that we are able to accomplish and the amount of time it takes to accomplish. My eyesight has been bothering me a little bit lately. Like, I feel like my eyes have been a little strained. I think I need to go to the eye doctor, which is why I'm sitting here and I'm wearing my glasses tonight, in case you're wondering, like, Tina never wears glasses. What are those, fake glasses? Is she just trying to look smart? What's the deal? So welcome to the voices inside my head. So yeah, these are prescription. I'm very nearsighted, and I have the camera computer a little farther than normal. So I'm having a hard time sort of seeing and reading your comments and your questions, and so here I am. So let's talk about trauma narrative. Let's talk about healthy narrative. Let's talk about your questions that you have regarding a healthy narrative or a trauma narrative, or the shifts and the changes that happen in the narrative surrounding our trauma, and how we can accomplish a level of healing that is realistic in our lives and sustainable, and even like upwards, right? Like we start sort of here, and we're sort of like healing, and then like sometimes we feel like we go down like a little bit, and then like we're like back up and we're healing, and we're like, oh my goodness, I'm experiencing like a uptick in in my healing. And so when we talk about our trauma narrative, it's the story we tell ourselves and others about our trauma. And that story changes depending on the response we receive from people that we tell, or the response we get from ourselves when we tell our narrative. So for instance, when I say our trauma narrative shifts, what I mean is, let's just, okay, I'll give you a good, like just a random example, for instance, okay? So recently I incurred some bullying, okay? I was bullied. And it was sort of private. It was within our community, and I received some very harsh critiquing of myself, and it wasn't in a loving or helpful way. It was in a, you know, like, you're annoying and not helpful and whatever, and like all I do is basically volunteer my time trying to help people. So to be bullied within my own community was very not only shocking and degrading and dehumanizing, but very triggering for myself. So in the very beginning of this sort of like interaction, like if I were to tell myself the story, the narrative that I would place surrounding that event, or if I were to share with, I didn't tell anybody at first because I was very ashamed and very embarrassed and humiliated that I had done something that was, you know, viewed as annoying or not good or whatever. So let's say the narrative that I place on this interaction or this situation is, oh my goodness, so like I can't even believe that in my own community someone would act one way in front of everybody else and then private message me and be hateful in their speech and traumatize me and be unkind. And it was so traumatizing and was so triggering, and I just wanted to cry and rock myself in the corner, and I was so humiliated, and I just wanted to quit, and it invalidates all the work I've been doing for all these years in our community, and I can't believe it. Seriously, like, who does this person think they are? And like, it would be very valid for me to feel that way, right? Like that would be a natural sort of like narrative that I would attach to something that felt so like violating and dehumanizing, you know, to the work I do. So, because I felt, let's see if I can walk my talk, and like, let's say I'm establishing a healthy boundary around the situation. When this person, I feel, I prefer, I need. Okay, here we go. So when this person chose to attack me and my character, I felt very invalidated, and as though they were attacking the body of work that I have been creating for years and years and years as I'm sharing my healing journey publicly, which isn't an easy thing to do. I felt invalidated and attacked and devalued and bullied and humiliated. And so when they did that, that's how I felt. What I would prefer is if they would word their critique in a way that was helpful and constructive, because constructive criticism is constructive, right? Hence the word constructive. So I'm all for constructive criticism. In fact, in all the companies I've ever worked for, like in previous jobs, because I've worked in corporate America, I've worked for Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. I ran a business development company. I did business coaching. I've, you know, what else have I done? I was in hospitality for years, in luxury hospitality. What else? I was the only female board member on a telecommunications company when we did our IPO, when we did our initial public offering, and and I helped with all of the stock preparations and getting all of the stock shares and everything ready for all the shareholders. And like, I mean, I've done a lot of things, right? So like, I forget where I was going with that, but like, I felt like this person was attacking my entire body of work that I've been working on just for the past like few years. And when you heal publicly, it's not an easy thing to do. And I've chosen to heal publicly so that I empower other survivors to go, hey, healing's possible. Like, she was barely functioning, and like now she's doing really well. And so I can do that. If she can do it, I can do it. And so I guess I would have preferred, oh yeah, that's what I was saying. In all of my jobs that I ever did, one of the things that they would put on my annual personnel review, my employee review, was they would always put, Athena thrives in an environment of constructive criticism. Athena welcomes constructive criticism. Athena responds well to constructive criticism. Like, it's something that I really enjoy. I enjoy when someone is honest with me about something I'm putting out into the world so that I can improve upon it and pivot, and what's my next iteration of what it is I'm doing so that I can improve personally and professionally, right? And that's something that I really have always sort of had. And someone is at my door. I'm recording a video. Sorry about that. Thank you. I think I have a package. They said they're going to leave something for me outside my door. So I'm going to be here now. Sorry about that. So anyway, when that person attacked me, I felt degraded and dehumanized, and as though they were attacking my body of work. I would prefer that they would reword their criticism to be constructive. And in the future, I need for them to think before they type. There, that's me walking my talk. When you, I feel, I prefer, I need. That's how to establish a healthy boundary. So the narrative that I created around this particular situation was all of those things I said. You know, I catastrophized it basically. Like I felt, you know, like I was gonna die and I just wanted to rock myself in the corner. And while that was true in the moment, right? Like right now, today, I'm not feeling that way. Like my narrative, my trauma narrative has shifted. I can look at it with a little bit of a different perspective and I can say, that was not helpful. The way they corresponded with me was not only unprofessional, but it was unethical. And it was unkind, and it was, there were no signs of tact or compassion. They didn't logically state their points and leave it open for communication, which is what human beings do when they're striving to be healthy. There was none of that going on. So now if I want to shift from my trauma narrative and I sort of, you know, I sort of look at it from a different perspective, and it's important that we look at our trauma narrative, right? It's important that we look at the story we tell ourselves about our trauma. Now, if we were to apply that, that was just something that happened this week. Let's apply it to our childhood trauma, right? So our childhood trauma is something that is deep, 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 like deep, deep, deep in the core, like in our solar plexus, like, oh, this gut wrenching, we feel like it's going to wreck our lives. And it often does, because it is soul destroying to have someone that we were supposed to be able to trust and who was supposed to love us and care for us, for them to betray us in that way and not provide a safe place and not care for us and love us. And so that is a deep, 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 deep wound. That isn't something that someone was just spouting off, deciding to message me, you know, all of these, how it's basically probably a reflection of, like, you know, how they felt about themselves. So when we attach a narrative to our childhood trauma, it's important that we allow ourselves the ability to add or subtract to that narrative. I'm going to say that again, because this is a real key point. Okay, guys, this is where we go from struggling and merely surviving to, you know, getting sort of that like glimpse of the light at the end of the tunnel so that we can be thriving and enjoying our lives and enjoying our relationships. Okay, so I'm going to say it again. It is imperative that we give ourselves permission to add to or subtract from our trauma narrative. It doesn't mean that our version of that narrative in the beginning is untrue. It simply means that the farther along we get from our trauma and the more we heal and the more we're on our healing journey, that we become, over time, usually when we are surrounded by safe people and we are validated in our truth, we become desensitized to the actual traumatic effects of the retelling of our trauma narrative. So I know that I shared this previously about prolonged exposure therapy and how that's not something I recommend for trauma survivors, because there's just no need for us to relive our trauma, you know, for over and over and over and over again, and relive those painful moments, the color of the shirt, the smell in the room, you know, what we had for lunch. Like, there's no need for us to go into that type of detail if we're going to heal from our childhood trauma. So, but what I will say is, when crafting our trauma narrative, it is imperative that we allow ourselves permission, since we are the author of our truth. We are the author of our truth, so therefore we have the ability, we have the power to add to or subtract from that trauma narrative, okay, in the telling of that trauma narrative. And what that transitions into is such a powerful thing. And that is when we no longer feel the need or the urge. Needs and urges are different than desires. Okay, so let's be clear. Over time, we will feel the need and the urge less often to share our trauma narrative, because over time we are validated in our truth, and we share our truth, and we are met with compassion. And then eventually, over time, this could take years and years, this could take decades. I'm on year 17, and here I am, and I'm sort of now raising up other leaders and mentoring people and helping them share their trauma narrative and move on to healthier narratives. Okay, but the 17 years is a really long time. So please don't shame yourselves if you're not like, oh, Athena is able to just talk about her situation and she doesn't cry anymore or anything. Every time I try to say anything, I start crying, and I'm just a bubbling fool, and so I can't do what she's doing, and so I'm done. I'm not going to ever heal. Like, that's not the truth, okay? So let's give ourselves permission to add to or subtract from that narrative that I just spoke. So eventually you'll shift into a healthy narrative, which is, I am healthier now, and I've taken these steps to become healthier now. My relationships are healthier now. My finances are healthier now. My body is healthier now. My mind is healthier now. My relationships are healthier. My job is healthier. My relationship with food is healthier. All of the different aspects that the trauma affects our lives. Now, trauma affects our lives in this multi-pronged approach where it's just like, right? It attacks everything. Our childhood trauma doesn't just, like, one person's act during childhood, their selfishness, their sociopathic tendency, their psychopathic tendency, their maladaptive coping strategy, their pain, their trauma, their narcissistic behavior or urges, their sadism, their Machiavellian tendencies, one moment that they spend victimizing and exploiting one of us, it lasts a moment for them. It's just a blip for them. And for us, it shatters decades of our lives. And it doesn't have to do that for forever. We can actually take that power back, and we can actually craft our trauma narrative. We can practice sharing it in safe spaces with other survivors. We can receive the validation and the compassion we deserve. And eventually we transition from the, this is where it all affects us. It affects our minds. It affects the way we see ourselves. It affects the way we see the world. It affects our finances. It affects our ability to keep a job, to balance a checkbook, to eat healthy foods, make healthy choices, be in healthy relationships with our children, raise children, don't raise children, have pets, the way we treat everything, right? It affects all of it. But we have the ability to add to and subtract from that trauma narrative and transition into a healthy narrative. And that is why I've started this series for you guys. So that is my 19-minute intro as to the series that we are beginning. And so I don't want to see anybody complaining that it took me 19 minutes to explain what the video is about, because it's because this is the intro to the entire series, and we're going to be doing several different videos on this topic because I want to answer all your guys' questions. And I want to invite you on this journey of crafting your trauma narrative and, giving yourself permission to add to or subtract from the story you tell yourself and others about your childhood trauma. And I want to be real clear about something right now, okay? The bad things that happened to you when you were younger are never going to be good. Bad things don't become good. I'm not one of those people that's going to tell you that, well, everything happens for a reason, and I'm not going to pluck a scripture out of the Bible and say, God works all things together for good. Now, what I am going to say is that the Bible's true and that eventually all things end up working out for the good eventually. That never, ever, ever, ever means that bad things become good. You being abused and exploited as a child or over a long period of time in a concentration camp or in a slavery situation or in a domestic violence relationship or in an abusive childhood or locked away in a closet because your parents didn't care about you, or being starved or neglected or mistreated or yelled at or ignored or devalued or hit or sexually abused, those things are never going to be good. I am never going to tell you that those things are good. And so if I'm not going to tell you that those are ever going to be good, why would you craft a trauma narrative? It just seems pointless, Athena. This is why. When we get the courage to speak that which has been kept in the dark recesses of our mind and in our soul for decades, and we speak it out into the world for others to bear witness to, it empowers us. And we give ourselves permission to add to and subtract from the narrative that we put out there, depending on the validation and the compassion that we receive when we craft that narrative. It takes a lot of courage to craft a trauma narrative. It takes a lot of courage to share that narrative. And it takes a lot of courage to heal. And over time, we shift from a trauma narrative into what becomes a healthy narrative that no longer shows the traces on a daily basis of that trauma. What does that even look like? What does that even mean, Athena? Well, that means that I'm 17 years into my healing journey, and I've just happened to decide to heal in public and help other people talk about their trauma and heal from their trauma. Not all of you guys are going to end up doing that. You guys might end up crafting your trauma narrative, sharing your trauma narrative, healing from that trauma narrative, and you move on to write children's books. You move on to start a business making custom wallpaper. You move on and you invent a widget that optimizes people's websites and makes them go faster. You move on and go work for a Fortune 500 company and become an innovator, and you raise up other people, and or you become a salesperson at a local flower shop and live your dream of being able to be that person everybody comes to want to send flowers. And you know, not everybody is going to end up spending their whole lives sitting in their trauma, talking about their trauma, and as one of the gals at my church says, picking your belly button lint. Now, it can appear to the unknowing outsider that I sit around picking my belly button lint all day long, just talking about trauma, talking about my trauma, just talking about my trauma. But that's not the case. Why? Because I have given myself permission to add to and subtract from my trauma narrative, knowing that I'm shifting into a healthy narrative. And I can honestly tell you with certainty, with great confidence, that I am a healthier person today than I was 17 years ago. I attract healthy people. I have healthy boundaries. I have discernment. I have safe relationships. My relationship with money is healing. My relationship with food is healing. My relationship with people is awesome. My relationship with my child is a lot healthier than it ever has been ever. And I no longer allow myself to be surrounded by toxic people who spew toxic ooze all over me and expect me to caretake them. I'm a healthier person today. So I have shifted from my trauma narrative into a healthy narrative, but ironically, I'm sitting here talking about my trauma narrative with you guys, wanting you to grasp the concept of what a trauma narrative is so I can help you shift into a healthy narrative. And I don't have any problem doing all that. Like, I'm kind of stoked to do it. Actually, it makes me feel super accomplished. And I feel like this is my purpose in life. And I'm going to shift over to your questions now. So thanks for taking the time to be here today. Thanks for being in the chat box, supporting one another. Thanks for giving this video a thumbs up. Thanks for subscribing to this channel. Thanks for sharing this video if you think that it's going to be valuable for someone, anyone in the whole wide world. You guys are amazing. You guys are the reason I get to do the work I love. You guys are the reason I get to sit around and pick my belly button lint all day long and just talk about all this stuff and help other people. And it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to get a drink of water. And I kind of want to go see, like, I honestly think I know what's at the door. I think it's a package from my son and my daughter-in-law, because every year they buy me a book by one of my favorite authors, and then they write on the inside cover, they write, instead of buying me a card and writing in it, they write on the inside cover of the book, like what they would normally write in a card. And so I think that's what's at the front door because my birthday's tomorrow. And so I'm kind of excited to see. So maybe maybe at the end of the video, I'll go see. I'm going to end this video in about 35 minutes. I'm going to answer your questions for 35 minutes, and then I'll pause, and then I'll go get the box, and I'm going to come back and do a different video for you guys privately. Just come back to the channel, and you'll see, oh, look, there's a link for it, and just click on it if you feel like watching it. And I'll explain to you everything that went down with YouTube and the changes coming up on the channel and everything else if you're wondering what's going on. And then for those of you who are watching this on a replay, I'll put the link to that video down in the description, bottom description section of this video. So if you're interested, you can watch it, and if you're not interested, don't even worry about it. But I'm going to answer your questions now after I drink some water. Let's see what's going on. My glasses fall down a lot. Have you noticed that I touch my face a lot and I fix my glasses a lot? It's kind of annoying. I sound like my haters sending me messages. It's kind of annoying. Okay. Oh my goodness, there is a lot of questions. Oh my goodness. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who sent in questions. So John Harvey, Jack, Shelly, Janie, Poppy, Billy, Hunter, Heroes Don't Wear Capes, and Joey. So I want to say thanks to all you guys. I'm going to answer as many of your questions as I can in the next 35 minutes, 30 minutes or so, 32 minutes. And then I'm going to do another video to explain what's going on YouTube. And then we will come back to this topic next week and finish up this topic next week. Okay? So let me just see if y'all can see me really quick. I'm going to sit back here and see if it's all okay. It looks like it's okay. I hope everything's good. I'm just going to try to see if I can read so I don't have to keep leaning up close. Let me see if I can read it from way back here with my glasses on. Ooh, I can. Okay, so here we go. John Harvey says, how do you have a healthy narrative when you experience too much negative narrative? Oh, it's a really good question, John Harvey. Well, first and foremost, what I would say is that it is imperative that you craft your trauma narrative, what it is that happened to you, the core wound of all wounds. If you are here on this channel because you are a complex trauma survivor and you don't know what complex trauma is, just Google CPTSD or Google the word complex trauma and you'll know that's who this channel's for. So it's imperative that you craft a trauma narrative. What is it that happened to you? How did it go down? Who was involved? How did it affect you? Who, what, where, when, why? And you know, the why is where we get stuck. Why was I abused? Why didn't my parents care? Why did my pastor abuse me? Why did my youth group leader lie and say they were going to take me to practice when they didn't? They actually, you know, they made me do things I didn't want to do. Why? Sometimes we don't end up, but if we go who, what, where, when, and then we leave the why and we go, you know, we'll talk about the why. We'll talk to other people about our trauma narrative. And if we never get the answers that we're looking for, then we've worked through our trauma narrative in such a way that we can move past. We eventually, believe it or not, this is very hard to believe because I never believed it for probably about 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years. I never believed that if I didn't have all the answers, including the why, that I would never be able to move past anything and ever be able to heal because I didn't know why. I didn't understand why all this bad stuff happened. But I was able to craft a narrative around the who, what, where, when, and how it affected me. Who, what, where, when, and how it affected me deeply in every area of my life that it touched. And then you share your trauma narrative. And then you get the validation and compassion that you deserve from the safe community that you have around you, which is what I've provided with all of the groups that are safe and private and no one knows about it and it's just you and other safe people. And then we shift into a healthy narrative. And then to address part of your question, John Harvey, that you're experiencing too much negative narrative. If that negative narrative is in the past, we can move forward and we can get the compassion and the validation we deserve in the present. And then that negative narrative from the past gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and it diminishes But if your negative narrative is in the present, then I would recommend you establish and maintain some extremely firm and healthy boundaries with any toxic people in your life, because when people are toxic, they give you a negative narrative. They talk negative to you. They bring you down. They criticize you. They criticize what's wrong with you. They question you. They question your reality. They cause you to question your reality. And those are toxic people. Toxic people do those things. And so if you have people doing that to you now, those are toxic people in which you should seriously consider establishing and maintaining some healthier, firm boundaries with. And that will help you with any negative narrative that's happening now. And if it's a negative narrative from the past, we can work on that, because we can receive the validation and the compassion we need now, which makes our truth and our current situation louder and bigger than what happened a long time ago. And it's kind of like a healthy, like a stream, or like a glass of water. If this glass of water was dirty, the more I turn on the faucet and fill up the glass with fresh, clean water, then after a while, all the dirty water ends up coming out and more clean water's going in. So in regard to the negative narrative, let's say I have this glass filled with negative narrative, negativity from previous people that have not validated my truth and tell me that I should just be over it by now, and tell me that I should just have already forgiven, and that's in the past. What's wrong with you? Why haven't you gotten over that yet? What's wrong with you? That happened a long time ago. I've been through worse than you, and I'm not still hung up on that. What's your problem? Don't you know that we're supposed to forgive our family? Blood is thicker than water. What's your problem? You know, let's say I have a whole cup filled with that. And that's not really healthy for me to sit in for too long, because those people are refusing to look at the truth, and they're refusing to validate what's happened in my life, and they're refusing to call something that is disgusting and wrong and unkind and abusive what it really is, which is disgusting and wrong and unkind and abusive. They want to live in a false reality. They want to avoid. They want to live in a place called denial, and those things are never validating for our truth, and they're never compassionate. It's more self-serving for them. They're heavily vested in the idea of just denying that anything bad happened to you, because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want to make waves in the family. They don't want to put shame on the family name. They don't want to, they're more concerned about everybody else, and they want you to just follow suit. What do you think in telling the truth? You know, worse things happened to me and I never said anything. And you know what? That's their deal. That doesn't have anything to do with you. So if I had a whole cup filled with negative narrative, if I turned on the flow up here of a faucet pouring into my cup of people from our safe groups that are all healing, 180 different countries of people on our YouTube channel, and many of them, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them in all the different groups, all choosing to heal and say, I'm sorry that happened to you. That sounds painful. No one deserves to be treated that way. I hope you know that I don't see you that way. You deserve to have compassion and love and kindness. And I went through something similar to that. And I'm so sorry that you're struggling today. I struggle sometimes too. I'll sit here with you. I'll hold a safe space for you so that you can heal and experience life in a different way. And I'm sorry that you've never felt like you belong. I'm sorry that you've been ostracized or excommunicated from your family just for telling the truth. I'll be your friend, and I'm glad that you're speaking up, and I'm proud of you, and I'm proud to know you. And so that faucet of clean water pouring into this dirty cup filled with negative narrative, after a while, the whole cup is clear water, and it's clean, and it's healthy, and it's not negative narrative. It's filled with healthy narrative. So I hope that's helpful, John Harvey. That's the best way that I can visually describe what it is that we're going to do during this series here on the YouTube channel. So next question is from Jack. Jack says, how do I get past the bad habit of repeating my trauma narrative, i.e. the negative messages my abuser fed me? I repeat them out loud often. Ooh, that really is difficult, Jack. That is such a struggle. And you know, sometimes that's just a a moment in time. You know, sometimes that is just something we need to do until we receive the validation and the compassion that we deserve. And then once we receive the validation and the compassion we deserve, then we make an intentional choice to give ourselves permission to add to or subtract from that trauma narrative, and exchange those negative words for positive ones, and then move forward. But it's an intentional choice, and that's a hard choice to make sometimes. So I would say getting past that habit, it sounds like there's a little judgment on yourself there. You're calling it a bad habit, which, you know, I could use a different word. I could say that it's not necessarily the healthiest of habits. It's a habit that you've learned from someone. Perhaps someone in your family had a habit of repeating something that was unhealthy, and so you're repeating a habit you're repeating something that was taught to you. And so what sometimes we need to do is stick our heels in the ground and dig our heels into the ground and say, nope, not me. I'm going to be the cycle breaker. I'm going to be the one that breaks the cycle. I'm not going to repeat that same habit that was taught to me by other people who are unhealthy. I'm going to be the cycle breaker. I'm going to break the cycle of repeating these negative messages, and I am going to replace those negative messages. I'm going to allow myself to question those messages and ask if there's any validity in them and any truth in them. And then I would find the truth to match up with the lie. And I would start repeating. Anytime I would have those negative thoughts, I would look over to the column of the truth that actually refutes the lie, and I would say those things out loud until it sort of stuck, and that became my new narrative. And I know that you're a big fan of affirmations, Jack, so perhaps forming your truths in the forms of questions, like, you know, is this really true? Could this new, healthier version of my trauma narrative be true? And I would shift it that way, because you're a huge fan of that, of affirmations and sort of forming things in the form of a question. I think that helps you. So I would suggest you do that and do that on a regular basis, so that your new autopilot is actually healthier than the old one. That's what I would recommend. Hopefully that's helpful. Shelly says, my question, how do I explain in a non-weird way to acquaintances that I just don't have the same situation as they do? For example, I didn't do a lot of the things they did growing up. Oh, Shelly, I'm so happy you asked this question. Oh my goodness. I had this come up during a call today. I had a business call with a colleague, and not necessarily a colleague like in the trauma work I do, but a colleague, like a fellow entrepreneur type person. And I wanted to find a way, like you said, like in a not weird way, because sometimes we're automatically thinking like, oh my goodness, like our situation must seem so weird to normals, like who haven't been abused or exploited or trafficked or, you know, scapegoated their whole entire lives. And so how do we, you know, how do we say it in a way that, you know, isn't weird? So I was faced with that same challenge today, and I simply just skimmed the surface, and I said, you know, I had some extenuating circumstances in my childhood that kept me from experiencing, you know, some of the things that most kids experience. And I leave it at that until someone asks me. And usually that someone will ask me, usually someone will say, so what did you mean by that? You had extenuating circumstances. And then I will judge the situation, keeping in mind, is this person a safe person who deserves to hear my truth? And am I maintaining healthy boundaries within myself? Because remember, one of the main signs of not having healthy boundaries is oversharing immediately. And so there's no need for me to overshare immediately. I don't have to justify my existence to anyone. But if someone inquires and then I say, well, you know, it involves severe abuse and exploitation and some trafficking. And if they are like, oh my goodness, so sorry, like I didn't mean to ask, and they're obviously like visibly freaked out, like if I've decided that this is a safe person that deserves to even hear my truth, then I would say something like that. But if they're just like, what do you do? Like, you know, like if you go somewhere and it's like, you know, it's what everybody says. It's like the thing, like, oh, what's the weather like? Oh, what are they serving for dinner tonight? So what do you do? And it's just like very surface, then I don't even bother. Like, I seriously don't. Like, the positive experience that could possibly come out of it, which is not likely, isn't worth the emotional energy that it's going to take me to hopefully craft my narrative in a way that doesn't repel people, right? I think we as survivors spend a lot of time hoping that we're going to find a way to craft our narrative that doesn't make other people uncomfortable. And the bottom line is, not everybody deserves to hear your truth. Not everybody's going to care. The people that you think should care sometimes don't care, and then that causes us to feel weird. And so to protect myself, Shelly, from feeling weird, I discern whether or not that person deserves to know my truth. And if I decide that they deserve to know my truth, then, you know, I'll share with them personally, or I'll say, you know, I'll talk to you about it later. Let's just say it was a little bit, you know, it was a different situation. I'll leave it at that. I'll keep it real surface. And then if they inquire personally, like later, then I'll decide if I want to share it with them. But, you know, my story isn't one normally that I will tell a group of people. It took me, I was in a Bible study group with a whole bunch of ladies for, I would say, about 6.5 years before I ever shared my truth with them. You guys have known me for 3.5 years on YouTube. Every week we've been hanging out. Every week for 3.5 years. Here we are. And we talk deep. We go from a, hey everybody, how are you tonight? It's so good to be here, to like a level 10. Here we are at a level 1, and then we go to a level 10, and we start talking about like childhood trauma and how to heal from childhood trauma. My in-person relationships are different. My ladies' Bible study groups, you know, everybody's got their own junk. Everybody's got their own lives. Everybody has their own stuff. And not everybody deserves to know my truth. They just don't. A lot of people that you meet in the world don't really want to know your truth. They just don't. They don't have the emotional bandwidth to be a person who's going to be able to hold a safe space for you or validate you or show compassion. They're just wrapped up in their own deal. Their kids kept them awake until 5 in the morning. They had to be at work at 7:30. They're running on 2 hours sleep. Their husband's upset because dinner was burnt. They're running late to Bible study. Now they feel crappy. They're overcommitted. They're underpaid, underappreciated. And then we come along and we're like, oh, by the way, I was trafficked. They're like, what the fuck? Like, they don't know what to say. They don't know. Like, seriously, they don't know what to say. And like, who am I to like expect them to like take over all of the weight of my stuff that's taken me 44 years to process, thinking that they're going to get it in the first 5 minutes of a conversation? Like, really? This is not going to happen. And yet we re-traumatize ourselves over and over and over again because we're so desperate to just be heard, which is why it's so important to craft your trauma narrative and share in a safe space with other survivors so you can receive the validation and compassion that you deserve. So to answer your question, Shelly, how do you share in a not weird way that you didn't experience some of the same things that other people experienced during childhood? I would, depending on the situation, I would say it was a little bit of a different situation when I was growing up. There were some extenuating circumstances. I've used that one. And they'll say, oh, like what do you mean? And I might follow it up with, well, how in depth would you like me to go? It gets pretty graphic. And then usually, because I give them an out. I want to give them an out. Like, they're the ones that asked. They're the ones that want to know. But I want to give them an out. How in depth do you want me to go? It gets pretty graphic. So, you know, and then I think my favorite thing to do, and I know Poppy's here tonight and a few other of you guys know, I'm famous for using humor as a redirect. So I'll say, Well, like, when was the last time you went to a scary movie? Because it might have been my childhood story. And then they'll usually laugh, and then they usually let it go. They don't keep pressing. They don't keep digging. If I determine that person is a safe person, then I will tell my story to them. I will. But if I don't, then I don't. Like I said, it's taken me 6.5 years to tell some of the ladies that I have known, like in person, close up. I know everything about them. I know their kids, their parents, their illnesses, their deepest things. And it took me 6.5 years to share my truth with them. It's just the truth. It's how I decided to handle it. So it's always up to you guys. You are the ones that control who you tell and when you tell, right? You don't always have to tell everybody everything. We don't have to tell everybody everything. It's taken us how many decades to process all of this stuff. Not everybody's going to get it right off the bat. So I would give them several opportunities, just giving them little bits of information, and not feeling compelled to overshare in an effort to feel validated, because that is not something that usually happens, Shelly. Bobby and I set up these safe groups initially years and years and years ago because we wanted people to have a safe place to just come and be themselves and receive the compassion and validation they deserve. And that is still what the groups are doing to this day. They serve as a safe place for people to come and receive compassion and validation that they've never received. There are some people, like we have some people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. There was a woman in her 70s, and they're finally receiving the compassion that they've needed their whole entire lives. But I highly recommend you use discernment when you decide to share your truth. Sorry, I'm like sitting on my hair. I highly recommend you use discernment when sharing your truth, because there's nothing worse than going into the supermarket or the drugstore to pick up a prescription, running into someone, and then you're in one of those places where someone asks you and you end up dumping out your whole life story in their lap, and then you move on with your day, and then you end up shaming yourself because you shared too much, or you end up feeling invalidated and frustrated that the other person didn't understand or care. Not everyone deserves to hear our truth. We get to choose who deserves to hear our truth, and we do so by making sure that that person is a safe person. And we were never taught these things growing up. We weren't taught who are safe people. Who's a safe person? No, it's not like, if we didn't grow up in a safe home, a safe environment, then chances are we're not going to know what a safe person is or what they look like. So I just want to encourage you, Shelly, that, maybe just keep it real light unless they pursue and they continue. And then there's nothing wrong also with saying, maybe I'll share that with you another time, like when we have some more time or something like that. You know what I mean? There's nothing worse than feeling invalidated or shaming ourselves because we overshared. Because I've done that. I've overshared and then felt horrible, like, oh my gosh, I'm such a moron. Like, what was I thinking? Like, how did I emotionally vomit all over that person that I haven't seen in 3 years that I just saw at Safeway? Like, oh my goodness, I was just at CVS picking up a prescription, and I ran into one of my girlfriends that I hadn't seen in a couple of years, and I just verbally and emotionally vomited all over her. Like, ugh. And then you end up texting and saying, sorry that I just like dumped my whole life story in your lap. I didn't mean to. I was just so excited to see you. And then like we have enough shame as it is. Like, we don't need to be doing other things that like cause us to feel even like more shame. You know what I mean? So hopefully that was helpful. And let me see if I can get out of this particular screen. Janie says, I feel, and please let me know if these answers are helpful, you guys. I hope they are. I'm doing my best here. I'm going to continue for another 9 minutes, and then I'm going to do another video for you guys talking about just whatever, everything that's been going on the channel, and why haven't I been around here, and why have I been over on you now, and et cetera, et cetera. So Janie says, I feel like I've begun my recovery journey before therapy, and I feel as though my narrative has changed for the better, but I'm sure it's not fully healthy yet. How do I pick out the parts that are still unhealthy? Ooh, this is a great question. So your trauma narrative doesn't necessarily need to become your healthy narrative. Your trauma narrative can always remain your trauma narrative, right? So for instance, the story you tell yourself about what happened to you, how it went down, the players that were involved, how it affected your life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can even start working on our healthy narrative. Like we could even start our healthy narrative off like, you know, if I was never abused as a child, or I was never exploited, or I was never trafficked, or I was never manipulated, or I was never fill in the blank, my life would look like this. The person I become would be healthy and strong and wise, and they would eat healthy, and they would have money in a savings account. They would have a retirement fund. They would have 3 children who are healthy and have healthy relationships with those children, and they would be married, or they would be single, traveling the world. They would be an author of a magazine column, and or whatever it is, like this, you know, moving towards that healthier narrative, of version of yourself. And then when we craft that trauma narrative of what the story we tell ourselves about our trauma, and giving ourselves permission to add and subtract from that trauma narrative, we can move into the, you know, this is the healthier version of me that would have been had I never been abused. And then giving ourselves permission to add to or subtract from that healthy narrative, meaning like, I dreamt of becoming this person, this person, and this person. This is the person I am today, but these are the goals I have. And these are the steps I'm taking to get to these goals. I want to be a linguist. I know that, Janie, I know that you study certain languages and that you're learning different languages. So like, had I never gone through what I went through in my childhood, I would have been a person that worked for the embassy, and I would speak 12 languages, and I would be the liaison for different government officials, and and my wardrobe would consist of only this, and the car I would drive would be this, and the relationships I have would look like this, and I would be single, or I would be married, or, you know, I would have 3 dogs and a horse, or whatever. And then we give ourselves permission to craft that healthy narrative into what our life looks like today, and the goals we have for tomorrow and for the future, and what it is that we want to do with our life. And that shifts us from what happened, to how I see what happened and how that's shifted, to how I wished things would have happened, to this is what's actually happening and what I see the future to look like. So it's like this, like, so there's like this down, up, over, up. Like, this is what happened. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. This is what I wish would have happened. This is what I would be had it not happened. And these are my goals that I have, and I'm headed in that direction. So there's almost like there's like this shift, this visual shift, this like physical shift that happens. I hope that visual helps you guys. Let me know if that visual helps you guys. And Janie, please let me know if that was helpful at all. Because we don't ever have to be fully healthy. I know you said, but I'm not sure it's not fully healthy yet. How do I pick out the parts that are still unhealthy? So I would say a way for you to find out if there are any unhealthy parts that are maybe keeping you stuck, like so that you can get past what parts are still keeping you stuck, like you want to move forward perhaps, then you're really in tune with your body. So I would ask you to really sit with your story and as you read through your story, find out which parts sort of trigger that feeling in you that feels like it's causing you to sort of remain stuck and not feel lighter. It's causing you to feel heavier in your body and not feel lighter. Those are the parts that are not going to be as healthy. And then we can work on those parts. Like, this is the way I'm still feeling about this situation. I still have these relationships. I'm looking at these relationships in this light. These are the things that I want to change about this. And these are the steps I can take to move into healthier relationships or healthier interactions, healthier relationship with myself, healthier relationship with my finances or with food or with relationships with other people or what have you. Anything that's causing you to be weighed down or feel healthy or feel heavier in your body versus feeling lighter and free, like I'm almost like spreading my wings in a way, like feeling free and lighter, then we know that if it's sort of feeling like this and it's almost like a heavier feeling, then we know that those are like parts that we should probably think about and look at. And then what changes can we make to move past them? Does any of this stuff make sense to you guys? Let me know. How does any of this sound to you? Does any of this stuff make sense? Poppy says, is becoming aware of our internal conflicts, beliefs, and trauma responses a part of our narratives? Yes. Becoming self-aware is huge, huge, huge in crafting a trauma narrative. How does it make you feel? How do you feel? Not what do you think? How do you feel in your body? And what do the words cause you to think about? And what are the words, when you speak the words, what do they make you feel? And then how do you want to feel? You know what I'm saying? So definitely becoming aware of your internal conflicts, beliefs, and trauma responses is definitely a part. And Pete Walker's book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, and his new book, which by the way, I received it on like the day it was released, and it's called Homestead. And it's his personal story along with a lot of clinical examples in his vision on CPTSD. So highly recommend. You know, I'm a huge Pete Walker evangelist. So Billy Hawkins says, you have been incredibly helpful to me, Athena. Thank you. Oh my goodness, I needed to hear that today. What are some steps to take in understanding and exploring the why, the how, the what, etc. of my trauma narrative? So if Harriet could pop up the thumbnail to the field trip that we took when we talked about journaling. Journaling is extremely helpful, especially if you have a harsh inner critic, Billy. If you have a harsh inner critic that causes you to stay stuck, or that you have a lower self-image, or you're very critical of yourself, or you don't think you're ever going to be smart enough or good enough, or you're ever going to heal enough, or you're not worthy of good things, or you're not worthy of healthy relationships, or you're stuck, or you're feeling like you're attracting unhealthy people, or you're repeating old patterns, then perhaps journaling about how it is that you're feeling, and then when you see what it is that is causing you to feel that way, then we can talk about taking some steps into understanding and exploring the why, you know, and the how and the what. If you are stuck in a pattern of thinking, we need to know where that voice comes from, Billy. So we need to know, like, where did your abuse come from? Who was your main abuser? What did they say to you? Like, if I sit here, I want to look at you right now, Billy. So let's say I was on my recent trip to San Diego, and let's say I thought I was going to be late to this seminar, and I was so upset because I planned ahead, and what should have taken me 6.5 hours to fly ended up taking 12. And so what if I was late to the seminar, and then I was saying to myself the whole time, I can't believe this. I'm always late. I'm always late to everything. Like, it's so selfish. Like, I'm always late. Like, what's wrong with me? I don't know how to plan. Now I would ask, tying into your question, Billy, I would ask, whose voice is that? Who has told me that I'm selfish, or that I'm always late to everything, or that I need to plan ahead, and what's wrong with me? Like, where did that voice come from? I would start there. I would start with my harsh inner critic. I would start with my limiting beliefs. What do I believe that I will never accomplish, and why do I believe those things? Who told me that I wouldn't accomplish those things? And I would start journaling about that. And I would start journaling about how I feel about what that critical voice said to me, and how the different ways that it's affected me in my life, so that I could deconstruct that and then reverse engineer my goals, navigating my way to avoid those critical messages, the harsh inner critic messages, because the harsh inner critic doesn't ever do us any good, right? I mean, they just tear us down and keep us stuck. It doesn't do any good. It's like ridiculous. But does that help, Billy? Will you please let me know if that helps? Hunter says, hello, Athena. How do you halt your false trauma narrative before it forces you into self-sabotaging behaviors? Ooh, I love that you're talking about a false trauma narrative. So the beauty about giving ourselves permission to add to or subtract from our trauma narrative is if we discover that we're telling ourselves messages that are not helping us and they're keeping us stuck, then we can just take that language out and we can find a different way to say the same thing. So like the example I gave you earlier, instead of me saying, I felt so horrible, I wanted to rock myself in the corner, it was horrible, like I just wanted to die, it was terrible. Instead of saying that, I could say, which is not a false trauma narrative, right? But it's a narrative that's not necessarily going to serve me. It's not going to be causing me to feel healthy and good and become unstuck. So I would look at like, how can I say the same thing, but in a different way that gives me a way out, gives me a way to navigate a way out of this situation. So instead of saying I wanted to rock myself in the corner and I just wanted to die, I could say the words that I was reading on the screen cut through me like a knife. They sliced through me and it pierced my heart, and I felt a little part of me sort of die, and I felt attacked and as though my body of work was being devalued, and I've worked so hard. And I know now that they were basically criticizing me in a way to tear me down so that they would feel better about themselves. And I know now that that's something that has very little to do with me and it has way more to do with them. So see what I did, Hunter? How I told my truth, but I gave myself permission to add to my trauma narrative without changing the details of it. It still hurt. But instead of me visualizing myself rocking in the corner, wanting to die, I simply shifted and said, the words cut through the screen and sort of sliced me open a little bit. And it was very painful. But I'm realizing now that their words were more of a reflection of themselves and the way they view themselves than it is about me. It was way more about them and it was way less about me. And sometimes we don't believe ourselves. Sometimes we try to say those things and try to feel better and try to put it into perspective and go, oh, it wasn't me, it was them. And we don't really believe ourselves because we do believe, well, we must suck. But I would ask you to look at yourself in the light of what is true about me. Who am I really? Am I really who this person says that I am? Like, do they really know me? Do they really know my truth? Do they know my entire truth? Do they know everything about me? Do they know how hard I've worked? Do they know how long this 17-year journey of healing has been for me? Do they know how every waking moment of my life is spent thinking of ways to share with other people what's helped me feel better so that they don't end up suicidal? Like, you guys probably all know this because you're here on this channel, but over 80% of the people that find me on YouTube have survived suicide. They have either contemplated suicide or attempted suicide. And they find me and they find the channel and they realize they're not alone, and they either private message me on Facebook, DM me on Twitter, or write me an email or leave me a speak pipe message on my website saying, I was suicidal until I found your YouTube channel. Over 80% of you. If there were 10 of you standing here in my living room with the sun in your eyes because it's really bright outside and I'm sitting over here and I'm not feeling it, but it's very hot over there, 8 of you would have contemplated or survived suicide. 8 out of 10 of you if you were here in my living room right now. So I need to keep in mind that everyone comes with their own stuff, you know? And I need to give myself permission to add to or subtract from my trauma narrative, my healthy narrative. And I need to keep in mind that when other people attack me, they're fighting a battle that I might not know anything about. And they have no idea how hard I'm fighting. Because I'm one of the 8 out of 10. Like, I would be over there joining the 8 of you. Because I've survived suicide attempts. I was definitely suicidal. And I have not met an adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse who has not contemplated suicide. Like, it's just painful, you know, to be violated in that way. So self-sabotaging behaviors, Hunter, are something that everyone deals with, including normals. So when we choose to reword it and give ourselves a way towards navigating through it, it really helps us not self-sabotage. There are so many of you that have amazing questions, and what I would like to do is I would like to do a note here so I can put a star next to the questions. Heroes Don't Wear Capes, Billy Hawkins, Joey, Katie, Deborah, Gary. All right. I'm going to answer all your guys' questions next week, if that's all right with you, because we're going to keep going on this series. And any questions you can come up with between now and then, jot those down and then ask them next week in the beginning of the broadcast. And I'll answer all those questions and answer your questions that you think of throughout the week as well. But for right now, I want to say thank you for being here. You guys are amazing. It's because of you that this community just keeps growing and growing, and survivors of trauma are healing all over the world. And then they're finding us, and they're getting plugged into Facebook groups, and their lives are being transformed because of interactions with you guys personally. So you're touching more lives than you even know. And I would like to pause. I'm going to grab the package outside, outside my door, and then I'm going to start another hangout here on the channel in 2 minutes at 10 after. Okay? 10 after. So right now, it is 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's 7:08 Pacific, and it is 10:08 Eastern. And at 10 after, I'm going to start a new hangout letting you know what happened on YouTube. Why was I kicked off of YouTube? Why did they suspend my live stream privileges? Why did they deem my content to be inappropriate in nature? And why? And what's going to happen? And what's the future of the YouTube channel? So thanks for giving this video a thumbs up. Thanks for subscribing to this channel. Thanks for sharing this video with anybody you think it might be helpful for. Any survivors who might feel all alone, or that might need a community to come and heal with. And I will see you in 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to click off of here, grab the package that's outside, and then come back and start a new video for you guys. What's happening with YouTube? Okay, so just look for the link. It'll be here in just a moment. And thank you so much to Matt and to Dawn and to all of you who are such a big part of this community and help this weekly live stream become a thing. So thanks for sharing and subscribing and all of it. And oh, I started a new channel for daily support for vlogs and daily support for survivors. And the link is in the description section of this video, down at the very bottom. So thanks for subscribing to my new channel. It's called Mostly Athena. I know that's not very original because it's just mostly me. But it's bit.ly/mostly me. And you could just click it. It's at the very bottom of the description section of this video. And I'll be right back in just a minute, okay? Bye, guys.